Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're stepping into, well, it's perhaps the most profound of all human inquiries, the nature of you.
It really is the ultimate question, isn't it? What is this? This I that's experiencing everything.
Exactly. And we're not talking about your personality or your job or your life story. We're talking about that fundamental thing we call I.
For most of us, that I is it's the absolute center of reality. It's this permanent thing that's either enjoying things or, well, suffering through them.
The journey we're analyzing today, it's not just some philosophical idea. Our listeners sent us sources that detail a systematic, stage-by-stage roadmap from Buddha Dhamma.
A complete instructional manual.
Yes, a manual for dissolving the self. It's a very pragmatic, step-by-step process designed specifically to move consciousness from a state of believing in I to realizing no I.
And that phrase, going from I to no I mean, that perfectly captures the scale of what we're talking about here.
It's huge.
It's a process of systematic self-dismantling, not self-improvement, which is a key distinction.
Yeah.
And it requires a level of detail, a rigor that you rarely see.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Our mission is to really extract the nuts and bolts of this process. We need to understand precisely how the concept of the self is meticulously taken apart, stage by stage.
And also, crucially, why this particular approach is considered more complete than some other, very highly respected traditions that are aiming for a similar non-dual outcome.
Right, we're looking at a full roadmap all the way to that final dissolution step.
So to start this journey, we have to be really clear about the objective, define the problem. And the ultimate goal, the destination of this roadmap, is the non-dual state.
And what does that mean exactly in practical terms?
It's a state where the experience, the thought, and the functional belief in I, me, and mine is completely gone, dissolved.
So it's not just an intellectual idea.
Not at all. It's an experienced, felt absence of selfhood.
And right away, there's a paradox, isn't there? The sources highlight this irony that it's the perceived me, the illusion, that wants to know what me really is.
Precisely. The illusion is trying to study itself out of existence. And that's exactly why, intellectual shortcuts just tend to fail.
So where do you even begin?
Well, according to the source material, the very first task is to identify what's creating the illusory self. You have to stop looking for a soul or some permanent thing inside you.
And start looking for the mechanism.
Exactly. The mechanism that generates the perception of one.
And the answer the Buddha Dhamma provides is, it's remarkably concrete. It's systematic. The underlying factors creating that illusion of I, me, and mine they're the five senses.
The five senses, along with the mind that's following it, which gives us a total of 6 senses, or 6 sensory channels that are just constantly generating input.
Okay, so this is the foundation of the whole system. We usually think of the senses as, sight, sound, taste, touch, smell. But here, the mind is the 6th.
The mind itself is designated as the 6th sense store, or manas. It acts as the organ that apprehends mental objects, so thoughts, concepts, memories, internal images.
So it's just like the eye apprehends light.
Exactly. So the illusory self isn't some deep metaphysical substance hidden away somewhere. It's just the result of this high-volume data stream created by these 6 channels running continuously.
So every time light hits the eye,
a sense of I am seeing arises. Every single time.
And every time a thought is processed by the mind.
A sense of I am thinking arises. It's this continuous stream of conscious sensory experience of seeing, feeling, thinking that the mind incorrectly bundles together.
And labels it.
It labels it as a continuous, enduring agent.
Yeah.
The self. The sources are so clear on this. The self is less of a thing and more of a persistent result of constant input processing. It's a fundamental error. And it's the cause of all our suffering.
So if the self is just this persistent data stream, what makes it so difficult and often painful to dismantle?
Yeah.
I mean, if it's not real, why does the suffering of I feel so incredibly concrete?
Because we are fundamentally attached to the content of that stream. Our constant engagement with the world through those 6 senses is what continuously reinforces the illusion of the agent, the sufferer, or the enjoyer.
We're hooked.
We are totally hooked. When the stream is pleasant, we try desperately to hold on to it. When it's unpleasant, we desperately try to push it away. And that striving, that push and pull, that is the definition of suffering.
So unless you systematically address those 6 inputs and how the mind puts them together, the illusion is just going to keep running.
It will never cease, which is why this roadmap is so practical. It focuses on the mechanics, not just abstract philosophy.
Okay, so here's where we move from defining the problem to actually providing the solution. This is where the roadmap gets, for me, truly fascinating.
It's incredible.
Our source material lays out 7 specific logical stages of comprehension, and they guide you, the learner, from that basic sensory identification all the way to the final non-dual end.
It's not a single flash of insight.
No, it's a gradual, structured disassembly of that whole sixth sense mechanism.
Think of it like you're being given the blueprint for a complex machine that you always thought was just a single, solid object. And now you're learning to see the screws, the wires, the plates, so you can take it apart piece by piece.
So the process starts with a foundational recognition. It builds directly on what we just discussed. Stage 1, identify.
Right.
You have to recognize it, not just intellectually, but through deep observation, that the entire underlying factor creating this illusion of a self is the operational framework of the 6 senses.
This identification forces you to stop searching for a soul and start analyzing the mechanics of your own daily experience. And once you identify that mechanism, you move right into stage 2, comprehend.
And this stage requires what? Just thinking about it.
It requires deep, sustained contemplation and meditation on the nature of these 6 senses and every single object they come into contact with.
And what's the specific targeted insight you're meant to gain at this second stage?
It's seeing, with just razor-sharp focus, the fleeting nature of the senses and their objects. The insight is that nothing lasts. The sound disappears the moment it's heard. The flavor vanishes as it's swallowed.
The thought evaporates the moment it's conceptualized.
Everything is just arising and passing away instantly.
And this is where that analytic tool comes in, right? The one that makes this roadmap so effective for dismantling the self.
Yes. This is the crucial point where we have to bring in the Buddha's teaching of the 5 aggregates, or the skandhas.
Okay, let's pause there. Because for our listener, this can sound like really abstract academic jargon, but it's the core of the practical system. How do these 5 aggregates work with the 6 senses?
Well, the 6 senses provide the raw data stream, but the 5 aggregates, form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness, they become the specific lens you use to analyze that data.
Okay, let's use a simple example. Let's say you're looking at a flower.
Perfect. So the eye sees the flower. That's the sense input. The first aggregate, form or rupa, is the physical reality, your body, the flower itself. Then immediately visual consciousness, vina, arises. This is just that momentary awareness that something is there.
And that awareness, that consciousness, it immediately triggers a judgment, doesn't it?
Instantly. A feeling, vedana, arises pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Oh, I like that color. Then a recognition or perception, sana labels it, that is a rose. This is where all your past conditioning kicks in.
And then comes the really powerful one, the one that causes all the trouble.
The fourth aggregate, mental formations or volitions, sankhara. This is the reaction. Because the feeling was pleasant, the volition arises. I want to hold on to this feeling, or I must get a rose just like that.
Ah, so these volitions are the automated habitual reactions.
Yes, and they are what reinforce the sense of I as the agent who likes, who chooses, who acts.
So by analyzing the 6 senses through this lens of the 5 aggregates, the insight you gain at stage 2 is, well, it's profound. The entire self, your body, your feelings, your perceptions, your reactions, your consciousness, it's just 5 distinct, momentary, impersonal processes.
There is no enduring owner. Instead of seeing, I am looking at a beautiful rose, you, the practitioner, are trained to see visual consciousness arose, pleasant feeling arose, volition to hold arose.
And then all those moments passed.
Exactly. That sustained comprehension reveals that the I you think is so permanent is nothing more than the continuous, instantaneous arising and passing of these 5 components. And this lays the psychological groundwork for the next stage, which is, well, it's an inevitable disillusionment.
Stage 3. This feels like the pivot point. It's where the intellectual understanding turns into this gut-wrenching, undeniable realization.
It is. This is the in-depth analysis of suffering, seeing the profound shortcomings, the drawback of relying on all 6 senses and their objects for any kind of lasting happiness.
So when that comprehension of impermanence from stage 2 is really strong.
When the fleeting nature of the aggregates is internalized, moment after moment, you're struck by a powerful observation. There is no lasting happiness to be found anywhere in this mechanism, not even for a second.
Every peak experience just immediately deteriorates.
Every single one.
That sounds incredibly uncomfortable. It's moving beyond just knowing things change to viscerally seeing the danger in that change.
That's the critical word from the sources, the danger. The observation is seeing the arising and passing of objects, along with the consciousness of each of them. The danger lies in our desperate, lifelong attempt to stabilize what is fundamentally unstable.
We're constantly cycling through the six senses, chasing the pleasant, fleeing the unpleasant.
Trying to secure that which is inherently unsecured. And that struggle itself is the definition of the burden. It's the constant, exhausting effort.
So the burden is the struggle.
It is the profound burden, the essence of samsara. Our sources describe samsara not so much as a chain of lifetimes, but as this continuous, painful struggle to manage sense experience in this very moment.
And once you truly see that everything comes and goes and that this struggle is just, it's exhausting and fruitless.
Like trying to catch mist in a sieve.
The conclusion is inescapable. The self is proven to be an illusion created solely by the senses and conscious experiences.
The I is just the story we tell ourselves about the exhausting cycle of the aggregates. Since the mechanism is unreliable and inherently painful, the owner of the mechanism must also be a fabrication.
It's the ultimate form of cognitive dissonance resolution. When you see clearly that the entire system you've dedicated your life to running is fundamentally flawed and inherently painful.
The motivation for holding on to it just collapses. It has to. And that profound insight, that recognition of the drawback, is the engine that powers the next two stages.
So once that deep comprehension of the burden really sinks in, that this whole sensory enterprise is an illusionary weight, that knowledge triggers stages 4 and 5. And these are practical, physiological, and immediate.
This is where we really see that relationship between releasing sensual excitement and experiencing bliss.
Stage 4 is the practical turning point, release.
Because the drawback, the danger, is seen so clearly for yourself. Because you finally understand that holding on is the source of the pain. The conscious and unconscious holding on to sensual excitement just gets released.
So it's not an act of forced willpower.
No, it's an automatic dropping. It's like realizing you're holding a burning coal. The grip loosens because wisdom, Panya, has proven that the grip itself is harmful.
And what is the immediate psychological and physical result of that instantaneous release?
Immediately following the release comes stage 5.
Relax.
Relax.
The source material is very specific that this relaxation occurs particularly in the tension that was previously held in the head and heart area. Okay, think about that physical tension we all carry. The knitted brow from trying to figure things out. The tight chest from bracing for something.
That physical tension is the bodily manifestation of the mind's holding on. It's either trying to stabilize a pleasant experience or trying to ward off future pain.
So the I is literally maintained by physical and mental clenching.
Absolutely. When the mind understands the futility of the clenching, the body lets go.
When the illusion of the self is broken, and the futility of that desperate striving for sensory stability is proven.
That tension has no anchor. It dissolves. The sources explicitly connect this peace, this feeling of getting rid of the burden of samsara, to the experience of bliss or a feel-good factor.
Okay, wait, I have to challenge this a bit. People hear bliss and they think of some ecstatic high-octane pleasure. But if the goal is to see the drawback of all sensual excitement, how can this relaxation be defined as bliss? Is it just a better kind of sensation?
That's a really important distinction to make. This bliss is not sensual pleasure. It's not kamasukha. It is the fundamental relief that comes from the cessation of desperate striving.
Okay.
Imagine carrying a 50-pound backpack every single moment of your life, but you forgot you were even wearing it. You just live in this chronic state of strain. The bliss is the feeling of finally putting that pack down.
It's the relief.
It's the relief. It's the fundamental peace of neutrality. It's the freedom from the burden of constantly running the six senses. It's the ultimate release of strain.
So the bliss isn't something you gain. It's the absence of the chronic effort required to sustain the illusory self.
Exactly. And that relaxation then naturally leads to what the sources call the most wholesome states, because the mind is no longer operating from a place of fear or grasping.
Which brings us to the final stages.
Yes. These final stages just describe the state that's achieved after that systemic release and stabilization of the insight.
Stage 6, enlightened. This is the culmination of the process, and it's characterized by the complete and utter absence of I, me, or mine.
The framework that generated the illusion has been fully analyzed, deemed inadequate, and functionally released.
This brings us back to that crucial fourth aggregate we talked about. Sankhara, the volitions.
Right, the mental formations. The profound truth that's revealed in Enlightenment is that there is no soul or permanent entity residing there to suffer or enjoy. If the self isn't a thing but a process, then the realization is about what that process actually was.
Can we expand on Sankara again here? Because this seems like one of the deepest insights in the source material, but it often gets glossed over. How do these volitions create the illusion of the self?
Well, think of Sankara as the automated decision loop running in your background processes.
Okay.
If you habitually check your phone every single time it buzzes, that entire sequence, the mental preparation, the urge, the physical movement, that is a Sankara sequence.
And we mistake that automated sequence for an I who's choosing to be addicted to their phone.
Exactly. Our sources clarify that all that existed previously, the suffering, the enjoyment, the striving, were simply preparations or volitions, Sankara, running through the conscious experiences of the six senses.
So the suffering wasn't happening to an enduring me.
No, it was just a specific habitual volitional reaction, a preparation for the next moment that was occurring within the flux of the aggregates.
So the enlightened state is the radical recognition that the actor was just an action. The I was merely a long chain of automated, conditioned mental reactions.
Yes. And once the illusion of the self dissolves, that volitional chain, the Sankara, ceases to function as personalized suffering or personalized grasping.
Which logically leads to stage 7, non-dual.
It has to. Since the agent, the I, is functionally gone, the inherent subject-object distinction that governs our entire sensory experience just dissolves. There's no one left to distinguish me from not me because the mechanism of self-identification is permanently disabled.
That is the final end and the ultimate realization.
And it's guaranteed by the preceding 6 stages. The whole dismantling process is complete.
This systematic approach, it raises a really important question for you, the listener. If the goal is this final non-dual state, lots of traditions seek it. So why is the Buddhist roadmap highlighted as being, well, superior? Especially when it comes to that final step of dissolution.
The sources suggest that many incredibly effective paths can get a seeker, say 90% of the way there. They can achieve profound experiences of unity or insight.
But they ultimately leave them stuck on the final hurdle of dissolution.
Exactly. The Buddhist roadmap is systematic because it's designed to guarantee that last crucial step.
So let's start with the comparison the sources make to Vedanta, specifically the Advaita tradition of Adi Shankara.
Vedanta is acknowledged as the most nearest to Buddha Dhamma in its approach to non-duality. Both traditions deeply understand the illusory nature of the separate self.
So where's the crucial difference?
The difference seems to lie in the method of addressing the personal psychological residue. Vedanta often teaches the realization that the individual self, the Atman, is identical to the ultimate permanent reality, Brahman.
Which is intellectually and experientially a stunning realization.
Absolutely. But the source notes that Vedanta has some missing steps for those who want to follow, especially concerning the last step of dissolution of the personal mechanism of the 6 senses.
So you might intellectually realize you are Brahman, but the everyday mechanisms of feeling, of Vedana and volition Sankara, are still running. They're still creating personal attachments because that systemic process of sensory disassembly hasn't been completed.
Precisely. The focus is often on absorption into a conceptual ultimate reality, rather than the meticulous step-by-step disassembly of the suffering mechanism itself.
So if you haven't systematically examined the 6 senses for their inherent drawback, stage 3,
And functionally release them,
Yeah.
stage 4, then a subtle sense of I, the knower of Brahman, can still persist.
Okay, what about another path? One that's also highly effective. Contemplating on who am I? Which we associate with figures like Ramana Maharshi.
A very rigorous, direct self-inquiry method. It's designed to penetrate the ego, and it is incredibly effective for reaching higher stages of realization.
The constant questioning. Who is thinking this thought? Where does the I thought arise?
That can severely destabilize the ego structure, leading to these periods of profound silence and clarity. However, our source states that the practitioner ultimately gets stuck on the last step of dissolution, as there are no steps beyond that.
Okay, I need to understand the mechanical failure here. If self-inquiry can reveal the emptiness of the ego, why can't it complete the dissolution?
Because self-inquiry is fundamentally a technique that uses the mind, the 6th sense, to look inward. While it exposes the emptiness, it may not provide the precise, methodical tools, like the analysis of the 5 aggregates, as constantly arising and passing.
The tools needed to functionally cease the volitional processes, the sankhara, that make up the illusory self.
Exactly. You've seen the self as an illusion, but you haven't systematically disabled the generator of the illusion.
Which are the 6 senses interacting with the aggregates.
It's like staring intently at a malfunctioning computer screen, but never opening the case to pull the plug on the power supply. The roadmap gives you the blueprint for pulling that plug, that functional release and relaxation in stages 4 and 5.
And we see similar shortcomings in other methods mentioned in the sources.
We do. Techniques that rely on imagery or emotional focus, like imagining a light inside the heart or heartfulness meditation.
These can offer powerful experiences of calm, of spiritual connection.
Yes, but they are often driven by deep concentration, samadhi, and mental construction. The sources suggest this might not work for a long time as there are no steps beyond the imaginative way of doing it.
So if the mental construct is removed or fails, the core illusion of the self is still there.
It's untouched because the 6 senses, the underlying generators of I, haven't been systematically taken apart and seen as this overwhelming burden.
What about methods focused on experiential intensity, like Shiva Shakti yoga or tantric techniques, or systematic devotion like the SRF of Paramahamsa Yogananda?
The sources note that tantric techniques can definitely provide a powerful non-dual experience, an intense burst of unity or realization. But again, they often lack the proper systematic steps for sustained, permanent application and that final dissolution.
They give you a temporary taste of the goal.
Without the consistent methodology to fully dismantle the source of suffering. And similarly, the SRF approach is described as really promising, but ultimately having no steps to reach the non-dual state as defined by this final, systematic, permanent cessation of the illusory I.
So the core takeaway from all these comparisons is it's vital for you, the learner. Experience or realization alone is not enough if it's not supported by a systematic process that addresses the core mechanism of attachment.
The systematic nature is the difference between a temporary peak and a permanent state of freedom.
So what does this all mean? If all these other highly respected paths often fall short at that final, crucial step of functional dissolution, the conclusion of the source material is clear.
The better approach, the guaranteed approach, is to operate through a proper foundational process.
Exactly. The strength and completeness of the Buddhist roadmap lies in its tripartite foundation. It ensures you're not just seeking a peak experience, but systematically purifying the mind and grounding the insight.
This is the integration of sila, samadhi, and panya.
And these aren't just, good practices. They are the 3 systemic steps that provide the necessary scaffolding for that whole 7-stage analysis.
Let's break them down and explain why they're so essential for achieving enlightenment, especially in this context of dismantling the 6 senses and the aggregates.
We start with establishing sila.
Often translated as ethical conduct or moral discipline. This is the absolute foundation. It's about cleaning up your external actions.
Why is this essential for dissolving the self?
Because unethical actions driven by the greed, hatred, and delusion that are rooted in the 6 senses holding on, they create constant mental noise and karmic entanglement.
So if your daily life is chaotic, driven by constant lies or harmful actions, you're just continually reinforcing the I that acts, that enjoys, that suffers.
You are. Sila stabilizes your external environment. It reduces the creation of new burdens that would just distract you from the intense analytic work you need to do in stages 2 and 3. Without sila, the mind is too scattered, too agitated, too guilty to proceed.
It makes the mind workable.
Exactly. And once the mind is stabilized by ethical behavior, we move to the concentration phase. Achieving samadhi.
Meditative absorption.
Intense concentration. And samadhi is the mental training required to actually execute the comprehension phase, stage 2. You cannot deeply analyze the momentary, fleeting nature of the 6 senses and the 5 aggregates if your mind is perpetually jumping around like a frightened monkey.
Samadhi provides the laser focus.
The focus you need to sustain attention on the momentary arising and passing of phenomena. It allows you to see the aggregates, vedana, sankhara, vinna, not as abstract ideas, but as experienced reality, instantly appearing and disappearing.
Without samadhi, stages 2 and 3 just become purely intellectual exercises.
They lack the depth, the sustained attention necessary to trigger that visceral realization of the drawback, which is the critical step.
So sila clears the clutter, samadhi provides the microscope, and these 2 pillars support the ultimate goal.
Getting paññāña, the wisdom or insight relating specifically to liberation from samsara.
And paññāya is the ultimate understanding.
It's the insight born of focused observation, which is samadhi, on a clean slate, which is sila. It is the direct comprehension of the 3 characteristics of existence as they manifest through the 6 senses and 5 aggregates: impermanence, suffering, and non-self.
And this paññāya is the outcome that allows those final steps of the roadmap, the release, the relaxation, the enlightenment, to actually occur.
It's the wisdom that functionally cuts the tie.
So the systematic nature of this full path, the integration of sila, samadhi, and paññāña, is what guarantees the dissolution process.
It prevents you from getting stuck, which was the issue with the other methods. You need sila to ground you, samadhi to provide the clarity of vision, and paññāña to intellectually and experientially complete the 7 stages of realization.
And that culminates in the non-dual state.
It's a comprehensive, systematic, and proven methodology that explicitly details the dissolution process, ensuring you're not left stuck at that final stage, just conceptually gazing at freedom without the tools to functionally achieve it.
So the ultimate implication for you, the learner, is that this is not a vague spiritual endeavor. It's a highly technical process. If you want the self to dissolve, you have to follow the steps designed to dismantle the very mechanism that's creating the I in the first place.
The mechanism of the 6 senses and the aggregates.
We've taken a deep dive into what is really a technical manual for escaping existential confusion. Let's just quickly recap the sheer efficiency and depth of this roadmap.
We started by identifying the problem. The illusion of the self is generated by the constant aggressive input and processing across the 6 senses, the 5 physical plus the mind. The entire I is just a product of this continuous sensory data stream.
And the solution is systematic disassembly. You analyze that stream using the 5 aggregates form, feeling, perception, volitions, and consciousness to see their momentary, fleeting nature.
This comprehensive analysis leads to the visceral realization, stage 3, that the attempt to maintain this flux is an unnecessary, profound burden. It is the very essence of samsara.
And that intense realization triggers the functional release, stage 4, of all holding on to sensual excitement. The immediate physiological response is that deep peace and relaxation, stage 5, that is experienced as bliss.
Which is fundamentally the absence of chronic strain, not the introduction of a new pleasure.
Right. And the final state is enlightenment and non-dual realization, defined not by gaining some new soul or self, but by recognizing that all the previous suffering and enjoyment were simply volitions and conscious preparations.
Sankhara. Automated, conditioned mental avans all along, without a permanent agent driving them.
And of course, the entire systematic structure is held together by those 3 essential pillars. Sila, for ethical grounding.
Samadhi, for a razor-sharp focus.
And paññāña, for the penetrating insight necessary to execute the 7 stages of dissolution.
And this guarantees that you don't get stuck at the final step, which is a failing point for other potent but less systematic paths.
This roadmap is radical because it promises the cessation of the sufferer. It requires us to look not for what we are, but for how we are constantly being created by our own sensory machinery. The whole process hinges on turning the microscope onto the 6 senses and watching them fail to deliver lasting satisfaction.
And that leads to a concluding thought for you, the listener, to mull over. The source notes that the journey is one of dissolution going from I to no I. If the goal is the cessation of the sufferer, how does the systematic practice of sila, samadhi, and paññāña fundamentally change your approach to the 6 senses right now?
What initial holding on to sensual excitement, that small, persistent tension in the head or heart that stage 5 addresses, could you examine just by observing its momentary nature?
The process of dissolution starts the moment you stop clenching.
Thank you for joining us for the deep dive. We'll be back soon with more insights from the cutting edge of knowledge.